I don't know why. Or
You
I
were
went to go count in to be like, and then I was like, oh right.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll just go hello together. That's what Yaskovich and I do. Unless you don't want to do that.
I mean, I can do that if you want me to.
Okay.
Like, I'm down.
All right.
It's your show, your rules.
Yeah,
like, I'm here to follow.
I'm gonna assert myself for once.
I'm a follower, not a leader. You know that.
Well, so am I. What does that mean then?
I don't know. I can't say.
Oh, it's just gonna be this.
Just go.
Gonna be
just
us
go.
Going, yeah,
just
okay,
go. Start.
Hello, and welcome to You'll Like 'Em, the podcast where we talk about music and give recommendations for various bands and artists that you might not have heard, or songs by bands and artists you know, but you might not have heard before. We also talk about an array of other subjects, and this week, Yaskovich isn't here, unfortunately. He's got a busy schedule, and our schedules have had a hard time lining up. But I did manage to get an old friend on the show.
Hey, I'm back.
It's Brooks. Remember the episode he did?
You thought I'd never be back, you fucks, and I'm here. I'm here to ruin the show again.
This is your third episode.
This is my third episode, technically, because the whole thing about the Killers was supposed to be just one episode, but then I just kind of rambled a lot, and then so we ended up making two episodes like a month apart.
Yeah.
And I'm back again.
I mean, it wasn't like it was an issue or anything like that.
No, it created a lot of good content.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes.
And it sounded good because that was the first episode we ever used a soundboard.
yes, that'll make a difference.
I remember like recording an episode after and being like, wow, this sounds like ass. But this week we're going to start off with a discussion that might transition into our recommendations, but we'll see. But right now we're going to talk about, since Brooks and I both enjoy movies and we work at a movie theater, we're going to talk about movie soundtracks.
Yes.
And the music that makes a movie, complete.
I'm a film boy, and so I'm familiar with film soundtracks. I would not say I'm the world's leading expert on it. Like a lot of composers, if you asked me, like if you played a soundtrack for me, if it's not like one of the ones that everybody knows, and you asked me to name who composed it, I would be like, I don't fucking know, man. Like this, how'd you get in my house? I don't know.
Name like as many film composers that you know.
Okay. There's John Williams.
Yeah.
Howard Shore, Danny Elfman, Michael. I fucking forget his name. Giacchini or something. That is not it. Giacchino, the guy who did the fucking Incredibles movies.
Oh yeah, his music's really good.
Yeah. Well,
I was saying that. I was like, the thing I like the best about Incredibles 2 is every time I go into the theater to clean it, the music is awesome.
Oh, the music fucking slaps in that movie. But like, I feel like we can get into this a little later when we actually like start talking about it. But like, his stuff is sometimes very hit or miss for me. I have a very clear example of that. Okay, so I said Williams and Elfman and Shore, James Horner, James Newton Howard, Hans Zimmer, whoever, I don't know his name, but like whoever composed all the Miyazaki films, I've listened to a lot of his soundtracks, and I feel bad that I don't know his name.
I was gonna throw out a name there, but I'm more than certain that I'm wrong. So I'm just gonna look up real quick who does the music so that I don't.
Yeah, don't do like.
No, I wasn't gonna make up a name. I know of a Japanese musician who also does soundtrack work.
Right.
And I was like maybe.
I know what you mean, and like I understand where you're coming from, because like with Michael, whatever his name is, like the worst thing is that he's like, he could be kind of Italian, and like that's fine, like, but I'm not gonna like make that attempt on a Japanese artist.
Okay, so I don't know if this is the guy, but this he did My Neighbor Totoro, Kiki's Delivery Service.
Bernard Herrmann. That's not the guy. That's just like an older composer who I liked.
He was Hitchcock, right?
He was Hitchcock. He was Twilight Zone.
Mm-hmm.
He made the music for Citizen Kane and Taxi Driver. I think I remember him like he died right after Taxi Driver came out. I'm pretty sure. I think he like called it a piece of shit or something. Oh. I remember there was like this famous like I can't remember if it was Taxi Driver or another film, but I know there was this famous great film that he made a composition he made a soundtrack for, and he called it like garbage and like the worst thing he ever had to compose for. I'm pretty sure it's Taxi Driver that he said that for, but I'm not certain. It might have been another film.
Well, I can always look that up as well. But the guy is
we have
Joe, and that's his professional name is Joe. It's Mamoru is his birth name, or you know what? It's Joe Hisaishi.
I feel like
I'm going to show you that.
Yes, I see.
Hisaishi.
I feel like there's no way we cannot butcher that name. Yeah. There's no conceivable way that we can pronounce that correctly at all. So I'm just going to say the Studio
Joe.
Ghibli.
That's what his name's Joe.
It can't be pronounced like that. It can't.
But maybe that's his like so like if he wants to get hired by people like
unless a Japanese individual walks into this room and tells me that that's how that name is pronounced, I will not believe that is how that name is pronounced. I am going to refer to him as the Studio Ghibli man. Ghibli. I can't even pronounce that right. Damn
it Ghibli?
Yeah, I believe it is Ghibli, yes. So we've just been kind of rambling for a bit, but movie soundtracks. Let's get to it.
So I have a couple that I know, like there's like the obvious ones. There's like everything John Williams has done.
Yes.
There's another favorite of mine is the music for Blade Runner.
Oh, Vangelis. He's another one.
Vangelis is another favorite of mine. When we've talked about him like millions of times on the show. Sorry, I'm just adjusting my mic stand.
Fuck yeah, Randy Newman. I almost forgot. I gotta. Oh fuck, that other guy. Hang on.
Randy Newman counts?
Yes.
Randy Newman's done more than just Toy Story and Monk.
Yes, he has.
I've listened to some of his songs like outside of that, but I didn't know he did like film work.
I know very little about him or his work, but I do have at least one thing that I can say. There's just so much to talk about. I'm gonna do Howard Shore's. Okay. Keep talking. Intro the topic while I do this shit.
Well, I think the soundtrack is one of the most important parts of the movie. It's very good for setting the mood and the tone of the film, and kind of giving, as you said, John Carpenter. I'm just watching fucking Audacity right now. It's lagging, but like it's still recording and everything's showing up like properly, but it's just being weird right now. So I also think just music use in general can be very important. Because you don't always have to have like a soundtrack to the film. You can like do what was it called? Dog Day Afternoon with the no music,
right,
and only incidental stuff like in the on the radio and stuff like that. And it has 3 songs attributed to its soundtrack because there's only 3 songs in the entire movie.
Okay, so here's the thing about movie soundtracks, and this comes down to film as kind of an art form. Like, just in case any of you listeners thought we weren't going to start like absolutely broad as fuck when talking about this, but like with film as an art form, the thing that makes film unique from other like visual art forms or art forms in general is like the ability to edit. And really the cut is the thing that really makes film stand out as a medium. And the thing that is interesting about the cut and about editing in general is it can be very musical in the way that it's kind of done. If you listen to editors talk about the craft, they often use musical terms, especially rhythm is one that you hear a lot. There's definitely a rhythm to cutting, and like it's like if you want to, the best way to learn editing yourself is to one, do it, but also like try to pay attention to when cuts happen and why, like what they cut to, and like the sort of like kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of musical notation that comes with cutting. Yeah. So because of that, and because that's so tied into film as an art form, is that film has a very long, very interesting kind of relationship to music, and sound in general.
Well, yeah, and especially because like the first films had nothing other than music in them.
Exactly. Like the first movies did not, like when we think of if you think of sound, like if you think of silent pictures now, usually people think of like they have no like dialogue, but they have a soundtrack. But like back in when they were first coming out, like silent pictures meant silent pictures, and the soundtracks you hear are usually just like interpretations of stuff that they would play at the venues of basically wherever they were showing the films and everything. And like often films would come packaged with sheet music that would be played, but there was really no way to enforce that. So like whoever's on the piano or like whatever, like they could even have more instruments in there. They could essentially play whatever they wanted, like whatever they felt like fit the movie and everything. So you have this like kind of interesting thing of where like some movies were definitely not at first made with soundtracks in mind. The soundtracks would always come later. And then as sound becomes a big part of film and everything, the relationship kind of changes, and you get a lot of films that are very heavily soundtracked, and then you like get stuff of like people, like we were talking about with Dog Day Afternoon, people kind of experimenting with not having films really have much of a soundtrack, and it can feel like I know some people can feel like they don't like music soundtracks a lot of the time because they can feel like it can really kind of manipulate, like people don't like being manipulated a lot, and like film, like it's interesting because film really is like just kind of manipulation. So you have to, like, it's manipulation that is lying about being manipulation. So like soundtracks have to kind of like work with that, and some are better at hiding it than others. And then like that's one topic of discussion. But like I feel like what we're going to be talking about is going to be like heavily soundtracked films and everything, stuff with like really elaborate scores. And like to make another distinction, we're probably going to be talking about like exclusively non-diegetic stuff as opposed to diegetic stuff that's like in the world and everything, and probably not like songs that already existed that were put in, like say like a Tarantino movie or something.
I mean, I still think that's always a cool choice too. Like if we look at Baby Driver, but that goes back to what you're saying about the editing, you know, like that the editing to have like everything like kind of mesh in with the song and kind of sync up is incredible in itself.
Yeah, and I think Baby Driver was an interesting example of like taking because it was written, I wish, like, I know it's kind of weird saying that, like, I wish that it had gone like further with it because it like went pretty far, but like films like Baby Driver, Edgar Wright wrote the screenplay with songs in mind, and like he would write a scene to be a specific length, and then like he'd have to find a song to match that length, and he wouldn't like break that rule. And interesting, and there is definitely an art to finding outside music and like pairing it with whatever scenes are happening, and I feel like that's an art in and of itself. And like when it's done very well, it can lead to like some like great cinematic moments, and when it's done very poorly, you get Suicide Squad, and you get the fucking like, I'm sorry, but like 2 years on, I am still baffled by the opening like 10 minutes of Suicide Squad. There's like 20 different songs played one after the other, and there is no possible way that you have not heard every single one of them 1,000 times before in your life.
Because I'm pretty sure like they play Welcome to the Jungle.
They play that. They play House of the Rising Sun.
Yep.
When they like fucking like, it's sort of like if like a baby thought of like, if you put like a child in charge of like choosing like the music and everything, like you open up on a scene of a prison in Louisiana, so you're just like, oh, let's put House of the Rising Sun, and then you see like fucking Captain Boomerang like doing some dirty deeds, and so you play like, you find the dirtiest band you can that's still like very clean and like mainstream and everything, in the form of AC/DC with their dirty deeds done dirt cheap.
And because he's Australian.
And he's Australian too. Like, it works on so many levels, like mainly none. So, and then like, I'm trying to fucking.
Did they use Bohemian Rhapsody in the movie?
No, that was the trailer did it.
But they put the fucking Panic at the Disco karaoke version on the fucking soundtrack.
They did. Like, that's also another hilarious thing about movie soundtracks and everything, is that like, if you like, whenever you fucking like, whenever there's a soundtrack released with all like these songs and everything, you go out and you buy it and everything, and like half of them, like especially if it's a big, you see this less, but like in the old days of like blockbusters and stuff, you would see like all these different like bands and everything, and all these different popular artists like make songs specifically for the movie soundtrack and everything. Like, I think Suicide Squad, funny enough, might be the most recent example of this, but it's been around for a long time. And then if you like walk into
like what was the one that was like Love Fool,
right,
by the Cardigans?
Yeah,
was the Romeo and Juliet one, and that was in like for like 10 seconds.
Yeah. But basically, what like they release this and everything, and you go into fucking Target and you buy the CD, and you look on the back, and like there's an asterisk, like, you notice the asterisk says like, does not actually appear in the film, and then like 20 of the songs have asterisks next to them.
And I understand that like there's things like it's like a demo track,
right,
or like incidental music that was in a scene but that scene was cut, or something like that.
Right.
Or not incidental music that was composed. The composer went through and worked on, and then there's Blade Runner 2049, which has. Did I tell you about that?
What?
The soundtrack for Blade Runner 2049? Right.
No, tell me.
So I like the soundtrack for Blade Runner 2049. People criticize it because it's very Zimmer-esque.
It is like the most Hans Zimmer, like a Hans Zimmer soundtrack has ever Zimmered. It's like, it's kind of ridiculous how far he goes into like everything, and that's me as someone who did not dislike the soundtrack saying that.
And I agree with that. I would have loved Johan Johansson version, but Hans Zimmer came in and killed him, and we all know that's what happened.
I don't think that's what happened.
I think Hans Zimmer slowly poisoned Johan Johansson because he knew he would be more talented than him.
Oh, jeez.
I like Hans Zimmer.
Hans Zimmer has made some very good soundtracks over his pace of his career. Well, I was about to say that I've been told this, and like I kind of agree with it, that Hans Zimmer has kind of ruined movie soundtracks, at least modern day movie soundtracks, kind of with the way that he composes, and the fact that a lot of the times the soundtracks are very good, and so people try to emulate him. I forget who made this argument. I think it might have been Every Frame of Painting in their last video that they did. But basically the argument was that in the old days, in the old analog days, the way a movie soundtrack was composed is you bring in a band, you bring in an orchestra and everything, and like the composer writes the soundtrack, and then they play it and they record it and they do like a couple takes and everything, and then they like put it onto the movie and everything. And they have like the movie playing like in the background on a big old screen so that they can compose to the film. And basically, then you have like digital stuff and synthesizers come on, and like for a while that's just kind of just with the way that they sound and everything, that's just kind of sticks with like sci-fi stuff, like Vangelis doing Blade Runner and stuff like that, and that's fine and everything.
But the funny thing about Vangelis is he started that 1980. When did Chariots of Fire come out? Was it 1980?
Like, yeah, I think it's like 1980, around that. But
because it won the Oscar in 81.
Right.
So.
Because like, and then as stuff progresses, you get more advanced like digital kind of sampling and everything, and you can like write digital soundtracks better. And so Hans Zimmer kind of is like one of the first real like, not pioneers, but like whoever, like whatever they say, like whatever the term is for someone who like really latches on to like a new form of technology and really like popularizes it and everything. But he was like really one of the first proponents of that kind of stuff. But the thing about, and this is still true
He's
of
an
like
innovator, I guess.
Not really, because like early adopter. That's the word.
All right.
But he was an early adopter and everything. But the thing about that kind of digital kind of soundtracking and like that digital music technology, and this is still true, like, and I've been discovering this as someone who's like just kind of starting out, like learning how to make music and getting really into like digital music making and stuff like that, is that when it comes to that stuff and like what it can sample, it is not great at emulating the sounds of, say, like violins or various string stuff or things like that, or like even to a certain extent brass. It's not really great at emulating.
Yeah.
But do you know what like digital stuff is fucking fantastic at emulating? Percussion. It's very good at percussion. And so Hans Zimmer scores often very much kind of lean into that, because that's what sounds better when you're first writing the music digitally and everything. That's usually like what sounds better. So his scores often lean kind of more heavily into that. But because of that, they're not as strong in terms of like melody and everything, and they're not as memorable as, say,
John Williams.
the old John. Okay, so here's the thing. There's a lot of, the thing about movie soundtracks is that whenever anyone fucking talks about like a good example of a movie soundtrack, 9 times out of 10 they're just gonna talk about John Williams and everything, because he is the gold standard, and he's made a lot of very good music over the years and everything. And it's really hard to find, like, it is not hard to find examples of good soundtracks in movies made by talented composers. It is very difficult to find examples of movie soundtracks that people actually remember and can sing off the top of their heads. And basically the only people who do that, the only person who really has a lot of examples of that is John Williams and everything.
Yeah. I was going to say Disney movies. Now, and I'm not just talking about the music, like the songs, like Hakuna Matata. I'm talking about like even the music for it. Like, I think Alan Menken's score for Beauty and the Beast is beautiful.
Yes.
And I think Hans Zimmer's score for The Lion King is also very good.
Yeah. It's just like, if you asked me, like, here's the thing, and like, I'm not saying this to knock any like composers or composers in general, because like I said, there are so many examples of just beautiful and like fantastic like music like throughout like the history of movies made by all sorts of people. It's just if you came up to me and you said just like, "Hey, can you like just hum like a song from like Alan Menken's score for Beauty and the Beast," and I'm like, "Okay, tale as old as time," and then you're like, no, I mean like an actual like,
Well, I mean,
he did write that, so that does count, but
Yeah.
like something without, and you're just like, oh, something without
like
lyrics
what
and
about
everything.
The beginning, the piano,
I do not remember that.
As soon as it starts playing, you're gonna
I'm
go,
sure.
Oh, I fucking.
I'm
know
sure
that.
if you played it for me, I would remember.
I can't
but like,
sing it because it's piano, and I can't play it on piano.
Do you know what you would not have to play for me, like in order for me to remember?
Star Wars, Indiana Jones.
The fucking like any John or like the Superman theme.
That's not Superman, but that's another John Williams.
Right. Or
did John Williams do Superman?
He did do Superman.
I always, for some reason, I always have a hard time with Superman, but it is hard to come up with lots of composers other than John Williams, and I just wonder how he got so damn good.
Well, like the thing is, like for one, okay, so the thing is that John Williams is a classically trained composer, and usually when like the thing about John Williams is that he is both incredibly talented, but he was also in the right place at the right time. And what I mean by that is that he's a super talented guy who's like kind of coming up in the movie music kind of composing scene in the 60s and 70s, and he starts working with Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, and he happens to compose like really great music, but also really great music that is attached to movies that everybody sees and everything. So when you combine,
it just becomes iconic.
When you combine those things, it means that basically anyone knows like what fucking Star Wars sounds like because everyone's seen Star Wars.
But and that's the funny thing, like it's everybody's seen it, and everybody's like heard the songs. But like it's so good that it gets that's why you remember.
It's because he's a melody guy, you know? Like he is very good at making really standout stuff and everything. And there's another composer who I know he gets shit sometimes, but he's also made some very good music. And he's made music for movies that you can also argue a lot of people have seen is Danny Elfman.
Yeah.
And Danny Elfman has made a lot of music that I really love, like particularly in both of the Batman movies that he composed music for and everything. And the thing about it is that I feel like I don't want to say that it's Danny Elfman's music is more complex. I don't want to say that because I don't know enough about music to actually like weigh in on that and have it be accurate, but I feel like there's some kind of aspect to it of where there's just like more stuff going on in it, and he brings in more stuff than like say like a John Williams. So like that doesn't make it worse, it just makes it like it's harder to just kind of distinguish it and just kind of like do it at the top of your head and everything.
Because it's like like you said, it's more, I guess you can say like a Danny Elfman score is a very complicated, guitar part or something like that you hear and you're like, oh, that's awesome. Whereas like John Williams is more like a very iconic riff.
Right.
Like if someone plays Smoke on the Water, you'd be like, oh, I know that riff. But like if I fucking brought out the fucking opening chords to Proclamation by Gentle Giant, me and Yaskovich would be like, oh! And everyone else would be like, I don't know what's going on.
Right, yeah. And like that doesn't mean one is better than the other, although I like John Williams' music more. Oh, it's just a dog.
I know, but she's my dog.
I love that dog. It's so goddamn fluffy.
Yeah.
Listeners, you have to understand, his dog is so fucking soft.
Yeah.
It's so good to pet.
I have two dogs, Sasha and Blue, and Sasha's an Australian Shepherd, and she's really like fluffy, and everybody loves her. I think we have probably like 3 people on the show already be like, man, your dog's so soft.
Yeah, it's such a soft dog. Hang on.
I want to get that on a t-shirt.
If we ever do merch, then like that'll
your
be
dog's so soft.
What a soft dog.
I always like a good main melody that you hum on the way home, like E.T. or any other John Williams scores.
Right.
But I always do appreciate like a good use of instruments, you know, to create atmosphere. I don't just like want the of the violins.
Right.
Some ski always gonna happen.
Which you see a lot in like horror films and everything. Where like or like suspenseful moments of when like whoever they fucking got for it like doesn't know like how to properly like fit music to it, and like so they just like are just really stretching out just a note on like a couple violins and everything. And I know like before anyone like comments or sends an email or anything saying like, oh, that's not true, like I know there's examples of that working and being very good in very good movies and everything. I'm just talking about shitty movies right now. I'm talking about shitty movies that do it shittily, and that is, and I know you can think of an example of where that happens, because of course you can, because it happens all the fucking time. Where you get like one of the lower tier Blumhouse movies, like where like it's just like they're kind of like they're walking towards a door and like they're moving slowly because they know that the monster's on the other side, and it's just like and like and
then they open the door and there's the whoop,
and it's like bark, bark. And it's just like it's like a cat or something, and then they're like and it's silent and the score goes out, and then they turn around and the monster's just like boo, and then like eats them or something, and then the music's like tick, 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 tick. I guess we can blame Bernard Herrmann.
I was
for
about
that.
to say like that's probably rooted back in people with Psycho, but that's iconic as well.
That's like a good example of like if that's probably the most iconic piece of movie music that was not made by John Williams, is like because like I said how there's good examples of that. The premier good example is in Psycho, in the famous shower scene, and like if you watch that scene, like that film uses music very well and everything, because there's a lot of points when the music just kind of drops out and everything, and it has like there's a lot. Okay, so I love Psycho a lot. I'm not a huge Hitchcock guy, but I do think Psycho is a fantastic film and everything, that was very important to have come out in the time that it did, because like you see it of where the movie kind of starts out, and the soundtrack reflects this. And this is one of the things I love about movie soundtracks, is that they can often reflect the style and themes and like what the movie is going for, of where in the first part of Psycho and everything, it does kind of, you get some of that like some of the kind of music that comes later, but for the most part, like it wouldn't really be out of place in most movies of that era, that being the late 50s and early 60s and everything. And it's heavily scored in the first part, especially when this is gonna be spoilers for Psycho, but it came out in 1960, and if you haven't seen it yet, then like it's kind of your fault.
Or if you don't know what happens.
Or if you don't know what happens, like you fucking know what happens in it. Like you may not know the characters' names.
Lady gets killed in shower.
Yeah,
boy has mommy issues.
Yeah. You know that. Okay, so I know I was trying to make a point. I always go off on side tangents, but like I say this being a huge hypocrite, because in school, in a literature and film class in high school, I had seen Psycho before, but we were playing Psycho, and there were a lot of people who hadn't seen it, and I made a very conscious effort to try to not reveal what the twist was, even though, like, even to the point where I actively lied about it was when someone had figured it out while I was having a conversation with them and other people, and actively, like, saying, like, oh, no, I've seen the movie, it's this other thing, and everything. Just to preserve the moment when the twist happens, which is great. And then like all those people walked away saying that was like one of the best movies they've ever seen. I was like, fuck yeah. But anyway, in the film, like especially when Marion first takes the money and runs and everything, it's heavily scored, and it kind of has like, it's a little weird for the time, but like it wouldn't really be too out of place. Like Bernard Herrmann's other scores on the much more popular at the time Hitchcock films like North by Northwest were very similar in a lot of ways. So it wouldn't really be so out of place. And then the shower scene happens, and there's no music at the start and everything. And then so she's just getting in the shower, and it starts, and like you sort of see through the curtain like the door silently open, and Mrs. Bates walking in and everything, and coming up, and there's no music up until she pulls the curtain and like lifts the knife, and then like the strings are kind of matching like the screams and the cutting, and it's all like something very like not something you would not see in movies at the time, like in every aspect of it and everything, with those very like harsh strings and like the harsh cutting and like just the violence of it and everything, and it all comes together to make an experience that was very revolutionary at the time in terms of film, and everything. There's a lot of reasons why the French New Wave guys all were like huge Hitchcock fans and everything.
I'm gonna name a few scores and scorers that I enjoy. Well, first of all, another extremely iconic movie score, or at least theme, would be, Vangelis's Chariots of Fire. Dun 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 dun. This is one everybody knows. And that's all original stuff.
It's been parodied all like to hell.
Mm-hmm.
Like the music, that's an interesting thing of where like the music has definitely outlived the film in a lot of ways, because I have not seen Chariots of Fire. I think it's about like foot racing or something like that.
It's about the Olympics.
Like, I don't give a shit what it's about. It's like, but I know that song.
Well,
I know
the main character's Scottish in it. I have to see it, Brooks.
I don't care. I do not care.
Well, Vangelis, I think, is an excellent composer for films. His score to Blade Runner is phenomenal, and his score for Chariots of Fire is also incredible. The main theme, iconic, and then there's a lengthy track, I think plays during the credits or something, just called Chariots of Fire, and it's really good too. It's a lot of like motifs from other songs in the album, the soundtrack.
I think that's like, it's interesting to compare Vangelis to Bernard Herrmann, because they like, while stylistically in terms of the kind of music they made, they were super different.
Polar opposites.
But if in terms of like just kind of innovating the way that movie soundtracks are done, I think that like, and I don't know as much like in this area of like movie history as I would like to, so I could be just talking completely out of my ass, and there could be like a whole other person who like did all this stuff before either of them or whatever, but like just the way that they kind of like reflected the different eras that they were making music in, and like how they innovated movie soundtracks. And I find it interesting how like probably like, and I feel like this is like with any like art form or any kind of like with film especially, like you can say the same for like film directors or anything, where like the two kinds of artists and art that you remember the best are like the ones on like the ends of the spectrum of where like you have the ones that are innovating and doing these new like bold things and everything, and then you have the ones that are kind of more traditional, but like they're so like goddamn good at what they do, and their craft is so good that even though they're like not doing things like quote unquote new, they're doing like old things better than anyone has ever done. And that's like where you get like John Williams is on like the traditional set like side, where like he works with like orchestras and all this stuff, and like, like what you considered like traditional kind of film scores, but like he's amazing at it. And then you have people like Vangelis, who's like, working like pretty much doing it all like himself, and like working with synthesizers and like digital music, like in a time like where that wasn't common, and like innovating in all sorts of ways and everything. And those are really the ones that you remember. And then whoever kind of falls in the middle, who cares?
There's a really cool artist who did experiment with what's it called, with electronic scores and stuff, but that was way back in the 60s, I think, with Kubrick's Clockwork Orange. I forget the name of the person who did. I think it's Wendy Carlos is her name. She's transgender, a transgender woman. I forget what her name was when she did the music for Clockwork Orange, but it's all classical music but played on the synthesizer.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like midis and everything, kind of. I don't know if that's the right term for it, but
I think a Moog was used. I'm not sure though, but
and it's like you listen to something like that, and like even if it's stuff that was like composed before, like I don't think I would consider that the same thing as like a Tarantino or like an Edgar Wright, of where they pick like existing songs. Like that feels more like it's like doing covers, I guess, but like covers themselves like are, like I said before, for other stuff, they're like an art form in and of themselves. And listening to Clockwork Orange and like the shit that she did for it was like, it's so good. It's so good, and it fits. Just like, that is a fucked up movie.
yeah.
I don't think I've seen a movie that's as like fucked up as it and in the mainstream than when I saw Hereditary in theaters at our very... Okay, so for those who don't know, Conor and I both live in a very small town in what can be arguably called rural Maryland. It's called Westminster.
Very much so.
Yeah, we're very much in rural Maryland, in the middle of like fucking nowhere, and we have like the only theater in our county we both work at. It's literally like fucking built into the side of the mall and everything. It's like tiny and like one floor and everything.
It's
It only has 9 theaters, and like some of them are really small and everything. And like we got Hereditary, and I don't know how we did, but I'm endlessly thankful for it.
I missed it.
Oh, it was so good.
Yeah.
It was so good.
I remember until it goes online.
Like I don't mean to sidetrack too much, but like I remember, like, because Yaskovich and I were going to see it, and you were supposed to see it with us, but like I think you were like sick or something, or like...
I remember, I was either sick or tired.
Right. And it's a shame because I'd already seen it at that point, and I was seeing it a second time with Yaskovich and everything, so I knew what I was getting into.
Yeah.
And everything, but like that's... I don't mean to sidetrack too much.
No, you're good. But a couple other soundtrack artists I like. It's funny because, funnily enough, a lot of soundtrack has a lot of crossover with prog rock. There's a lot of progressive rock has always been a very influenced by classical and like orchestral music.
Right.
A lot of early prog rock bands did classical music, but like progged up, and like there's like performances of Emerson, Lake and Palmer doing like Blue Rondo a la Turk by Dave Brubeck, and like fucking they did a whole album based on pictures of an exhibition.
Right.
Which is weird because Greg Lake wrote lyrics for it all and stuff like that. But anyway, a lot of prog rock artists do get into soundtrack work. Like Vangelis was one. Keith Emerson had done soundtracks to either a couple of movies or just one. I haven't listened to it, but I don't feel too confident about it.
Right.
Alan Parsons Project did the music for, what was it called? Lady Hawk, which was an 80s movie with Rutger Hauer.
I know Lady Hawk.
I heard the music's not good in it.
The only reason I know Lady Hawk is because Movies with Mikey did an episode on Lady Hawk. That was like one of his earliest episodes and everything. And yeah, if you don't know that series on YouTube, I highly recommend it. It's very good.
So Alan Parsons Project did that. Tangerine Dream have done soundtracks for a lot of stuff.
They've done a lot of soundtracks.
Yeah.
And they've done some that I really like. They've worked with Michael Mann before, specifically I think on the soundtrack for Thief.
Yeah, Thief.
And everything. And like Michael Mann is definitely one of my favorite directors, and he often uses soundtrack very, very well and everything. And yeah, I like it. But like that's the thing, because when you listen to prog rock and progressive rock, and I'm not the biggest fan of it. I'm not as much of a fan as like you or even Yaskovich are. And I have my own reasons for that, which like it's for another time, for another episode. But there's like you were saying, they are definitely influenced kind of by like orchestral stuff in the same way that film stuff is. But like I feel like with prog and progressive, I think more than a lot of other genres, they kind of do have an element of narrative to them, which is what makes them kind of like go along with film and everything.
And also lengthier, kind of like,
there's a lot
complex
of
pieces.
There's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of changes and everything, kind of in the way that like there can be like, because the way that storytelling in films and like I guess any like storytelling medium works, it's all about like conflict and specifically shifts of like conflict and everything, and how like the story and the problems the characters are facing can like change from moment to moment and everything. And because like prog and progressive has like these lengthy songs that have a lot of different like parts to them, a lot of different shifts, it does come up with a similar kind of feeling that you would get in like soundtracks that were specifically composed to go along with the narrative of a film. And that's how you get stuff like fucking like, this is like one of the oldest examples of this, maybe even the oldest example, but people always say that if you put on Dark Side of the Moon, it matches up with Wizard of Oz, which it does not. It does not.
What's a really cool one is they have a song called Echoes.
You're right.
And if you link that up to the last segment of 2001,
I'd not heard of this before, but like when you said Echoes, and like I've heard Echoes before. Like before you finish that sentence, I'm like, it's gonna be 2001. He's gonna say a 2001 thing. I knew it.
Which the band like deny having anything to do with that.
Right.
They're like, we weren't watching 2001 as we were like recording and editing this, and we're like, we had no idea. And Roger Waters was like, Kubrick actually asked me if he could use like one of our songs on, I think, the soundtrack to
Barry Lyndon.
No, it wasn't Barry Lyndon.
That's a joke.
Yeah, the one that's set in Ireland.
The one from the 1700s.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Like they walk out and just like
maybe The Shine. No, not The Shining. It doesn't really. I don't think their music fits the tone of The Shining.
It was a song that came out in like the early. It was early enough that it was still. You know what? It might have been.
Was it
The Shining? It might have been The Shining.
Are you sure it's not like No, because
maybe it was Clockwork Orange. Maybe they wanted something for Clockwork Orange.
I don't know, because Clockwork Orange, they were pretty consistent with those different kind of classical music covers and everything. I'm trying to think. Because I'm trying to think of like what Kubrick films like were around.
I think it was Atom Heart Mother, the album by Pink Floyd album, Atom Heart Mother, which Pink Floyd were asked by Kubrick if he could use that in one of their movies, and Roger Waters said no because he didn't like the song. because he was like, I don't like this. Like, I don't think that's good enough to be in a movie. He's like, I don't,
Right,
don't use it in your movie.
Because I remember I listened to your retrospective on Pink Floyd albums. I remember that album was very low on the list.
Yeah, Adam Hart Mother's fine. It's just that, well, fucking just listen to the thing. I'm not gonna go on a big rant when we're almost at an hour.
Are we already almost at an hour?
We're almost at an hour.
Okay, so I have some last points that I want to make.
Okay.
One. I'm gonna kind of go through these like faster because I didn't realize how long we were going. But another score that's like kind of more traditional that I really love is what I specifically love about it is how it changes and evolves as the series goes on. Is Howard Shore's score for the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It's really good. It's beautiful and it makes me cry every time I listen to it. I really love Ennio Morricone's music. His fucking like Ennio Morricone's deal very much seems to be like you get like it's kind of hard to say because sometimes the editing in the films very much matches his music. Like he's very good at that. I don't know if like the music is made first and then they edit the scene to that, or if he's just really good at making stuff that matches. Because usually, a lot of filmmakers do this thing where they use temp music, and temp music is basically they take an already existing piece of music and they put it over a scene while editing to it. And like some directors like it and some don't, and some composers, well, actually, a lot of composers really don't like it. Because they end up making stuff that's very similar to whatever they end up using, and everything. If you listen to the classical pieces that were used as temp music for Star Wars, they're like very similar to like what John Williams ended up doing and everything. But like that's for like literally anything, literally any movie, literally any piece of music. Like it's influenced by stuff before. But like Ennio Morricone, I believe more than like. Especially when he collaborated with very good filmmakers like Sergio Leone, had an extreme talent of like the music really matching like the emotions of a scene like very well. If you listen to the music and listen to it while you're watching the final like scene in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, it's like transcendent in how good it is. Like I wish shit was like as good as that was nowadays. But speaking of Ennio Morricone, this will very quickly go into my next point. I don't mean to just talk over you, Connor. It's just I have some points that I'm the guest and I have some things I want to say.
Well, I get you beat during the recommendation section.
Right. Yeah. And so Ennio Morricone was hired, whatever, to make music for a little film that I love called The Thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was actually not used. And then Tarantino would go on and use a lot of it for The Hateful Eight, which is not a good movie. But like it's funny because Ennio Morricone actually really doesn't like working with Quentin Tarantino and everything because he doesn't like. I think what he said was he didn't like how Tarantino used music or like where he put it over a scene, and I feel like this goes back to the fact that like a lot of Morricone's early work really fits like the scene and everything a lot. I think he complained about Tarantino. I think he like said something like he just kind of throws music on there like just because he likes it more than like it fitting with the scene, which like I feel like a lot of the time Tarantino is able to do both. Like it's very clear that he very much likes all the music that he uses in his films, but I think when he worked with his original editor Sally Menken, I think was her name, when she was alive and she worked with him, she was always very good at making sure it still fit whatever scene it was, and then you can tell that like once she passed away, that his films started being worse.
Yeah.
And so, but the thing about The Thing is that that way I can transition into someone who I really want to talk about, that being John Carpenter. And John Carpenter has a very different kind of philosophy when it comes to his music that we made mention of before, whereas like a lot of more traditional stuff, you can just kind of listen to it on its own, or it's supposed to be like emotional and really like pair well with the scene, or even like completely influence the scene. Like if you've ever seen a video on YouTube called I fucking forget what it's called, but it's like E.T. without John Williams, is the scene in which E.T. says goodbye to Elliot at the end, but all of the John Williams music is taken out, and it's so awkward and funny.
I was
and
gonna
like,
say, I thought you were gonna say like as he gets on the ship, it just goes dum dum.
No. It's like it just takes out the music entirely, and it's just like the scene just does not work and everything. And it shows you how much soundtrack can really be a part of the film. Whereas John Carpenter, because he was often the composer for his own movies and everything, he often described his scores as wallpaper, where they were just kind of supposed to be there in the background, but not really affect like. It was you were not supposed to notice it.
Yeah,
was the thing. But at the same time, he also made some very good music. Like Carpenter had a very different philosophy when it came to soundtracks and everything, and he was very much a proponent of it being like in the background and not really affecting like the audience's reactions to whatever was happening on screen.
Yeah,
he always viewed like because he made the movie too, he was able to just be like, yeah, the movie's more important. And now that he's not really making movies anymore, he has a source of income, which is he does a lot of touring and everything where he can play his music. Oh my God, are you okay?
it's just a sneeze. I'm
bless
fine. Go on.
Bless you. Bless your little soul. So he tours now, and I've not seen any of his shows, but like I think it would be a very interesting experience to go to a John Carpenter show and everything. My
last one I want to talk about as far as like soundtracks go is talking about like the progressive rock and like soundtrack overlay.
Right. Yeah.
In the 1970s. From a little country in Europe called Italy, there was a very well-respected horror director called
I know where you're going.
Dario Argento.
And
Dario Argento was really good friends with a little band called Goblin, so he asked them to come and do the music for a couple of his movies, including the legendary horrific film Suspiria,
which I still have not seen. I
still
need to watch.
What's really cool about it is a lot of it is very exaggerated. A lot of the colors are very exaggerated.
Oh no, I know enough about Suspiria to know what its whole deal is. Yeah. It's just
like the red is fucking red.
Yeah, because that's very Argento and everything.
Well, what I like about the soundtrack for like Goblin's soundtracks, like their soundtrack for like Dawn of the Dead and Suspiria, it's like something profundo, like Rosso Profundo or something like that. Essentially, it's like Deep Red, which is the name of one of Argento's films. But it's all, they're like a 4-piece or something like that. So it's a keyboardist, a drummer, a bassist, and a guitarist, and that's it. And I think at one point they did have a second keyboardist so they could play like more complex stuff live. But there's a lot of unusual instruments that are being used in that for prog rock and rock music, I should say. So they use like these bells and a celeste, which is like the iconic like that's all that.
I really love that song.
There's like mandolin, but like it gets those like unusual instruments so that you're like, okay, this is a little more soundtracky, and then like halfway through the song, the synth comes in and then hits that like throbbing notes like whoop whoop whoop, and then the whole band comes in and fucking like breaks out, and it like builds up that kind of like and prog rock bands are really good, really disturbingly good, especially European ones, at making really terrifying music.
Right. Yeah. They're very good at being scary.
Yeah. I don't know if I told you about the one that Yaskovich was saying about Ashra Temple. They were very like experimental, and they have some songs that are very freaky. So
right.
But Goblin, or the music they made for Suspiria, is very good. It's very fast paced and very energetic, but at the same time very unsettling.
And that's another interesting kind of different thing in terms of the discussion on soundtracks, because like as far as I know, like I remember hearing this in a discussion about Suspiria, but like I think it was actually Edgar Wright who was talking about this, because he really loves Suspiria and Goblin. But he was saying that the way that they made it was they made the soundtrack first, and then like Argento basically came up to them, asked them to make a bunch of creepy stuff and everything, and then they put it to the film and everything. And that and when I eventually watched Suspiria, I'm sure that will be an interesting effect. I did not know that Goblin did the soundtrack to Dawn of the Dead.
Yes. I think there are two different versions. There's one version with like either public domain music. Yeah, because the that's public domain.
Okay. I was going to say then I'm very disappointed, because that means Goblin did not make what is quite possibly one of my all-time favorite pieces of music that was in any film ever, which is called The Gonk from Dawn of the Dead.
This is during the credits, right?
Which is it was okay for those listening. In high school, in both Conor and I were in the theater department at our local high school, and the thing about the theater department is during its play season and during the winter times, as these things called the winter one acts, which are little one act plays put on by the students, and they're directed by students. And when I was a senior, I got to direct one, and mine was like a zombie show or whatever. It was terrible, but I did use the gonk in it because like I'm a fucking nerd and everything, and I wanted to basically there's like the thing about that show was that I wanted to like I wasn't allowed to write it and everything, and even when I got the zombie script, I rewrote it a lot, but I couldn't rewrite it as much as I wanted to. It probably would have been even worse if I rewrote it entirely, but I wanted to do my own version that was called Dusk of the Dead, but like I wasn't allowed to do that. But I did fit in a Romero reference when I played this song, which is it's gonna sound terrible coming through my phone and everything, but it is one of my favorite pieces of music in any film ever. This was used in a horror movie. And that's enough that we won't get copyrighted. Okay, yeah. So, did you finish? Is that all you wanted to say about Goblin and everything?
Yep.
Because I have three. Okay, so I have three TV shows I can talk about, and then I have one more movie thing that is a transition into my recommendations.
Okay, well, make them snappy. We're almost at an hour 10.
Oh shit. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, probably like it's kind of. Like TV shows are really interesting because like you don't really notice a lot of the soundtracks, but like there's a lot of iconic TV themes, and I feel like recently especially over the past decade, we've been seeing a rise in like interesting TV soundtracks as like TV kind of evolves into different forms and everything. Yeah. And like probably the most iconic piece of music that doesn't have lyrics to it that has been put on television like is probably the theme song to Game of Thrones. And I think
I couldn't tell you what the theme song.
Well, like for the literal millions of people who watch the show regularly, they can tell you what it is.
Well, what's the theme?
Da 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 da. It's very okay. So Raymond Djawadi is a very good composer, and as I say this as someone who's a huge fan of Game of Thrones and is still one of my favorite shows. As the show has progressively gotten worse and worse, his music has become the best part of it, especially in these newest seasons. These newest seasons, the music is probably the best part. But yeah, he's very good at it, and he's very much kind of in the tradition of like he's sort of like a marriage between John Williams and Hans Zimmer, where he has like a lot of kind of percussive kind of heavy stuff, but he also like is able to come up with like a lot of very memorable like melodies and stuff.
Yeah.
And then my two shows that are both a lot more consistently good than Game of Thrones has been over each of their respective runs, that their soundtracks are on opposite ends of this musical spectrum. Number one is Steven Universe, a show that I love. Rebecca Sugar. The interesting thing about Rebecca Sugar, who's from Maryland.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Rebecca Sugar, she got her start working on Adventure Time, and she would make songs for Adventure Time, like a lot of Marceline's songs. I haven't watched a lot of Adventure Time, but she would make music for it, and like people would always like praise that.
Yeah.
And then when Steven Universe came out, Steven Universe is a very musical kind of show. Characters sing in it a lot, and like music is often like a big thing in it, and it's often very, very, very good. And if like I do not like musicals a lot, like we've had this you and I have had this discussion. I've had this discussion with a lot of people where like I don't like Broadway musicals very often, because that's just comes down to the way that like they're kind of made and consumed.
It's just musical's my least favorite kind of anything, really.
Here's my thing.
Which is funny because I love music.
Here's my thing about musicals. Like in terms of stage musicals, the reason why I don't like a lot of them is just the way that they're kind of done, and I'm sure a lot of people will disagree with me, but this is kind of just my opinion. Because a lot of people who are fans of musicals do not have the means or the money to go out to Broadway all the time and see them in person performed, the way that they consume a lot of them is by listening to soundtrack albums. And because that is the main kind of thing that people consume musicals for, a lot of times when musicals are written, they're written with the music in mind. And like, I know what you're thinking is like, oh, of course. Like, what? How else would they be written?
Well,
but
you got to
like,
focus on a plot too.
Yeah, the thing is, like every other aspect of it, I find often very underwritten, or even sometimes badly written.
Yeah, badly written, cliche.
Even when the music is very, very good. But the thing about Steven Universe is that the writing on it is very, very good. It's an honestly fantastic show, and they don't have songs all the time, but when they do, it's usually amazing. Mm-hmm. Like, it's this one of the most, like, there's a lot of examples I can cite for when, like, the story builds up to a point where, like, it goes to this, like, place emotionally, and then a song happens that perfectly, like, brings it all together. And then the other standout soundtrack that I've noticed that is completely on the other end of the spectrum is for a show that's also fantastic called Hannibal.
I knew you were going to say
Hannibal. The soundtrack to Hannibal is a bunch of fucking like drums and shit. And it's like, if you don't ever listen to it while you're high, or else you will have a bad time, because it is scary, it is stressful, and it perfectly fits like whenever you see like fucking like Will having a flashback, like having his like doing his empathy thing and like putting together one of the murder tableaus and everything, and like all these fucking like drums are going, like it's just so many drums, and it's great. It's honestly fantastic, and they should bring it back for a fourth season and everything.
Well, I'm sorry to cut this discussion short, but we are past an hour, so we'll at least in our recording time, maybe we can cut some stuff out.
We can probably cut some stuff out. I did ramble a lot and do a lot of side things.
It's fine. It's fine. We do that a lot.
You can probably cut out that part where I just play the gonk on my phone.
Well, I mean, we would do that anyway for the music stuff. But,
right.
So we're going to do recommendations real quick. Every week we do recommendations for a couple bands or artists that we want to, people to listen to or we want to talk about. And I have 2 for this week. Do you have anything?
I do have some. Do you want me to go first, or
we
would
can
you
trade
like
off?
To go first?
Yeah, you go first. You go first. And
okay,
then I'll go.
So like one of the whole soundtrack things that I wasn't able to get to is probably the best horror soundtrack that I've heard in the last couple of years, which is Disasterpeace's work on the film It Follows. And with It Follows, he does very good work. I've been listening to a lot more Disasterpeace because as I get into writing digital music and everything, I've kind of been listening to what he's been doing and the stuff that he does for video games and everything, which we were not able to get to. But he has an album that I was turned on to by a YouTube channel that I've been watching called 8-Bit Music Theory when talking about Disasterpeace's work in video games. It mentioned this album called Level, which was described as a chiptune prog album. And listening to it, that is definitely what it is. It's basically, it's all instrumental. It goes through like all these different songs, and each song is like, it's like named like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then like goes through 8, and then the last one's called Win and everything. And the album's called Level, and it's very good. I've been listening to it. My personal favorite of the tracks is probably 5. I really like what's going on with that and everything. And so if you like chiptune stuff, if you like video game stuff, and if you like progressive kind of stylings to it, I highly recommend that. Oh fuck, I dropped my phone.
Oh, it's down, man down.
I need my Spotify to be able to see what to recommend. Okay, so that's my first recommendation. And then, if you have 2, then I can also recommend another one.
Okay. Yeah, I have 2. You want to recommend another one? Do you want a minute?
Oh, do you want to?
Yeah, okay, I'll do it.
I thought we were going to trade off.
I think I might have said that and then just forgotten. So I have 2 recommendations for this week. The first one is just going to be real quick. It's Rush. I was hanging out with Liam a lot, and Liam was on a Rush kick, and I was like, you know what? I haven't listened to a lot of Rush recently. I've been letting that kind of slide. I was like, I'm gonna listen to some more Rush. So I got kind of like songs and like the albums from like their debut to I think their second to last album in the 80s, Hold Your Fire, from 87. And I was just listening, and I was like, wow. And I was just appreciating how like the change like between 1978 and 1980 and then 1981, there's a very like distinct drop in like how high Geddy Lee is singing because he's getting older.
Right.
And then like just listening to like the drums change, like on the first album Neil Peart's on Fly By Night, like it's very just kind of like, oh, I'm gonna be a hard rock drummer. By the time you get to like Moving Pictures, the one everybody knows with like Tom Sawyer, YYZ, Red Barchetta, he's doing like polyrhythms like all around the set, like on he's playing like eighth notes on the hi-hat while he's like hitting like the downbeat on the ride, and he's like hitting the snare on the upbeat, or sorry, I'm getting that mixed around. He hits on the upbeat on the ride, and then on the downbeat he's hitting on the snare and the bass drum. And it's very interesting to watch a band kind of experiment and kind of grow over their albums. But one that I was really kind of annoyed at was their 1975 album called Caress of Steel.
Okay.
When it came out, it was panned. Everybody was like, this is fucking garbage, because it marked a departure from when the year before with Fly By Night they were like, well, let's just still be kind of like a hard rock band. And then they were like, in the time between that, they were like, guys, you ever heard Genesis? They're fucking awesome. So they started like going into like a more prog style.
They're just like, let's be Genesis.
Yeah. So they're like trying to be like do a lot of this more like progressive stuff, like more complex time signatures, longer tracks. And so there's 5 tracks on the album. Bastille Day, I Think I'm Going Bald, Lakeside Park, The Necromancer, and The Fountains of Lamneth. And the last 2 tracks are over 10 minutes long. Necromancer being 12 minutes and Fountain of Lamneth being like 19 minutes. And then all the other tracks are like 5 minutes or roughly around then. Bastille Day is fun because it's kind of like a hard rock track. I Think I'm Going Bald's just kind of funny. And Lakeside Park's kind of boring. But The Necromancer and Fountains of Lamneth, along with Bastille Day, like I listened to them, I'm like, this album's pretty good. Like it's a bit self-indulgent in time, and then some of the tracks are a little, but like as far as like a step in the direction that they were gonna go on for like the next the rest of their fucking career, it's very interesting to see where it starts and see them kind of stumble towards like 2112, which would be released the year later and go fucking platinum.
Right.
It's like the exact same thing. Like a couple small tracks and then long tracks. So like the first side of the album was the first 3 tracks, and the second side of the album, well, first 4 tracks, I think. And the second side of the album was just all one track. And it's like the exact same as 2112, with 2112 being the first track and then a bunch of other tracks on the second side. But for some reason, 2112 was a success, and I'm trying to figure out how. I mean, 2112 is a great song.
So
what
you're saying is you don't like that this album was panned.
Yeah, I think it's unfair. I think the music on it's pretty like it is good. There's some good guitar work. There's excellent drum work, great bass work, really good vocal work by Geddy Lee as well on some of the tracks. And then it was just people were like, eh. And I remember Danny on Game Grumps was like, yeah, my favorite Rush album is Caress of Steel. And he's like, and the band hates it. And he was like, so I'll watch interviews and they're like, yeah, that we don't like that album that much. And he's like, and it breaks my heart. And it's a Queen 2 situation. When Queen's second album was released, the band loved it. They were like, yeah, this is great. But they were like a little more, artsy fartsy about it. They were like, this is going to be the good side. It's all the good side songs, and this is going to be the bad side, all the evil songs.
Right.
And then people were like, what the fuck is this?
What is this?
Like, you were singing on the last album about a big fucking Great King Rat. Now you're singing about like the March of the Black Queen and all this kind of stuff. So like it's like that, where they went in a direction. They were like, yeah, this will be cool. And then people were like, no, don't fucking do that. But they were like, I mean, we liked it. Okay.
No, like I understand. I understand completely. Because a lot of my favorite albums and bands are not well liked by critics, and in fact, my favorite album of all time was very divisive, and it caused the band to go in a direction that I do not know if it was the best direction for them to go in. But like, it's whatever. It's whatever. It's like, yeah. You'd never know. There's so many factors into what makes something like what causes the critical reception when it is, and like larger trends and being able to view things in hindsight and everything. Like opinion on certain stuff can change over time, and like you can never really fully predict like what it's going to be like. So really all you can work off of is your own personal response to things and everything.
So that's mine for this. One of mine for this week is Rush. Check out their albums.
So that was the quick one.
that was the quick one. It's just like, check out their albums, and if you want, check out Caress of Steel. It's not for everybody, I understand that, but I just don't think it should receive the kind of hate that it did.
Understandable.
Anyway, so your second recommendation?
My second recommendation is an album by a band called Always, but like Always is sort of spelled the same way.
It's 2 V's.
Yeah, it's A-L, then 2 V's, and then A-W-A-Y-S, and it's just it's pronounced Always, sort of like The Witch is just pronounced The Witch. But it's a album called Antisocialites. It was it was an album that I've kind of been meaning to listen to for a long time because I heard a song from it called Dreams Tonight
Which
and
is
everything.
an excellent song.
Which is a fantastic song and everything. I've been meaning to listen to the rest of the album, and I finally got around to doing it. Like, I listened to it, lost my train of thought. But I listened to it, while I was getting ready for work one morning, and it's really good. I really don't have a lot to say other than I liked all of it. I thought all of it was pretty good. Yeah, there were some songs that I liked more than others, but, it's a good album. Go listen to it. I really like their sound. They're like
kind of dream pop.
They're the kind of pop music that I like listening to and everything. And I wish Spotify would recommend to me more. But I've noticed a trend. So I've noticed a trend because I've added so Spotify does the whole Discover Weekly thing, which is they're very good at it. But I've noticed that so I've noticed that because I've added some mid 2000s to early 2010s kind of indie rock and everything, that's fucking all that I'm getting right now. And Spotify, I love you, you're very good, but I'm getting kind of tired of the same kind of guitars and shit and obviously white dudes singing about how sad they are and everything. I can relate to it, but I want more variety. I want more, give me some more pop stuff. Give me stuff from eras other than the 2000s. Yeah. Just give me something and everything, you know?
Well, you're in luck, Brooks.
Okay.
Because my next band, the first album hasn't even been out for 10 years.
Nice.
So it's a band that Ewan actually turned me on to. So, have you ever heard of a band called Tame Impala?
Oh, no, I know Tame Impala. Yeah.
So Tame Impala is made up of Kevin Parker.
Yes.
Period. Kevin Parker plays everything. He plays guitar, drums, bass, keyboards, sings, songwrites, all that fucking shit.
For all intents and purposes, he is Tame Impala.
Yes. But when they tour, they have touring musicians to play the parts.
They have session musicians that they work with and everything.
So Pond is made up of the touring bassist for Tame Impala.
Ooh.
Named Nick Albrook. Now, Pond is similar kind of style, that kind of progressive rock, kind of poppy kind of stuff.
Right.
Psychedelic, sorry, not progressive. Well, they flirt with progressive rock a lot, I think. But they're very interesting, and what I noticed is they kind of have more distinct sounds for whatever albums they're doing. I've heard 2 albums so far. I've heard 2.5. I've heard the album The Weather, which came out last year. I've heard their album Man, It Feels Like Space Again, which came out in 2015. And then I heard some stuff off of their first album, which is called Psychedelic Mango. Now I'm going to ask you, Brooks, which one do you think the weirdest was?
Go with the Psychedelic Mango.
Yeah, it was. It was almost gongy at times. They were singing on little voices.
Oh,
like
I know.
That.
I know. You're a big fan of the gong.
Yeah, but that's not my favorite album by them. My favorite album is the one that is the most recent, which is called The Weather. And it's very accessible. So psychedelic and prog rock can be very hard to get into for a lot of people because it's very complex. It's very all over the place at times. It can be 1 minute it can be very serious atmospheric music, and the next minute it can be song about people turning into flowers and Winston Churchill dressed up as a plastic bag. Stop, Siri! No! No!
Oh, it's a music podcast, though. We gotta have some music.
I don't know how she thought I said her name. Anyway, but the album, The Weather, is very good. So that's the one. Yes, that one.
Yeah, I just pulled it up on Spotify while you're talking about
excellent. It. And it has 2 tracks I very, 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 very much adore. They're just right back to back. God bless. And those are called Sweep Me Off My Feet and Paint Me Silver.
Don't you love it when you I forget which one. I was listening to fuck, what was the album I was listening to? I think it might have been Wonderful Wonderful by The Killers, but I remember there was an album that I listened to like months ago where like I was just sitting in my bed and I was listening to it and a song came on and I liked it a lot. And I'm like, man, that was a good fucking song. And then the next one played. I'm like, man, that's a good fucking song.
Yeah.
And I think it was Wonderful Wonderful. That was the one I listened to.
So they do weird stuff, like a lot of like weird instrumentation,
right?
And weird keyboards. They do stuff like this.
Oh, that's good. I like that. I have to talk over it so you don't get a copyright strike.
So it's a really good song, and it's about being a loser.
Right.
It's about being so indie rock, white guys talking about how much of a loser they are. But it's really cool. It's about someone with unrequited love. You know, they're talking this person, probably not even talking to them, just kind of talking at them.
Right.
So they're talking about how much, you know, like how not, you know, attractive or, you know, interesting they are, but how lonely they are and how much they, you know, like this person.
Right.
So it's very kind of like, you know, half kind of, you know, sung in a kind of like drawl almost, that it's, hey, you, I remember the lyrics right now. As I put it on the spot.
Please fuck me.
So, but then during the chorus, it's he goes, someone sweep me off my feet.
Right.
I gotta find the list. There we go. It's someone sweep me off my feet. I'm not an angel. I'm barely a man. I'm lonely, but I'm here. So baby, understand. And someone sweep me off my feet. But he belts it out at the top of his register. So like it sounds like he's not being like, I love you, go out with me. He's just like, fucking someone.
Like he's like yelling at God more than anything.
Yeah, like he's like, please God. And it's really cool, and I really like the song. And I had one of those experiences when I was listening to Run Away With Me by Carly Rae Jepsen, where I just listened to it like a couple times and I was like, I completely, utterly adore this song. It's one of the best songs I've ever heard in my life, and I just love it.
See, this is why you need to have me on the show more often, so that this podcast can be 100% very much for Carly Rae Jepsen and everything.
Yes.
Instead of being what I presume is a 50-50 thing when Yaskevich is here.
Well, we don't. I typically don't bring that up because we're talking about prog rock. But
right.
Any chance to bring up Carly Rae Jepsen, I'm talking about that with you the other night, and he was like, "Oh, I'm talking about this song," and he was like, "Oh, so like how you did with Run Away With Me," and I was like, and he was like, that's a really good song. It is. There's a third fucking recommendation. Fucking Run Away With Me off of Carly Rae Jepsen's Emotion album. Look, and the whole album itself is really good.
Listen to the album. Listen to the extended version, because the extended version has my favorite song on it. And listen to the B-sides as well. It was an EP that was released a year later, and it's also very good.
Yeah, her B-sides were better than some of the A-sides that came out that year.
And then also listen to...
I wanna cut to the feeling.
Cut to the feeling. That's it. Yeah. That's her latest single,
and then banging.
And then, like, I hope that she releases an album soon.
I heard that she was planning on one for 2019. I think.
2019. Got it. Marking my calendar.
Come on, Carly. But yeah, so that's my recommendation: is Pond, and of course throw Carly Rae Jepsen in at any possible opportunity.
Nice.
So go check them out. I had to not fight with Ewan. I just had to be like, Ewan, please let me talk about Pond on the show, because he wants to come on and talk about like those kind of like similar bands, and I was like, please let me talk about Pond.
Yeah, that should be fine, because like he can come on and do like a full episode. Like, you only talked like a few minutes about Pond.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like he can go off on those bands. He knows more about them than I do. Like he's hardcore fan of those bands.
It's sort of like how I could just like say like, hi, you should go listen to Dirty Computer, and then eventually you will bring me on for a full episode where we talk about the entire discography of Janelle Monáe, and we do a whole retrospective on it. But yeah, it's just like
that'll
that.
be a little shorter than the Pink Floyd one because she doesn't have fucking 40 years of material.
No, yeah, we'll just be talking about that whole I forget what the whole thing's called, but it's like the fucking saga that she's been making, the epic like cyberpunk fucking story that she's been telling throughout her albums. Yeah.
But
are we
that'll be us. That'll be us for the show, I think.
Yes, I was about I didn't want to be rude, but I was about to ask if we were ending soon because my butt is very sweaty.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for listening. I know we kind of flew around there with topics as we normally do, but
right, yeah,
but thank you everybody for listening. You can find the show on SoundCloud for now at Conor and Josh's You'll Like 'Em podcast, and on Libsyn. I'm just going to check the Libsyn page real quick in case it's not what I thought it was. No, it's Conor and Josh's You'll Like 'Em podcast as well on Libsyn. I'll put the link in the description as I usually do. And you can find us on Facebook, Conor and Josh's You'll Like 'Em podcast. You can find us on Twitter at You'll Like 'Em pod, all one word, no capitalization or punctuation. I am at Conor the Harris. Yaskovich is at JBY Films, I think.
Yeah.
I always forget. It's at JB Yaskovich or at JB.
He's
Films,
not
Films.
here. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Fuck him.
What are your plugs then, Brooksy?
You can probably the place where I'm less active on it because I've been trying to cut back on my use of it because I feel like it was actually destroying my brain. But you can find me on Twitter at BrooksRVernon. You can also find a lot of my work in the form of the podcast Friends by Default, which is the main thing that I do that our friends are on. Josh is on, actually. You can find that anywhere you can find podcasts. You can also go to 100 Years Productions, the YouTube channel, where we put up the episodes regularly, but we also I put up a song that I made. Calling it a song is a little generous, but I put up a song that I made in GarageBand, and soon, as in hopefully tonight, I will be putting up both a short film that I made for my for my previous semester at film school called Make Your Move, and then also another song that I made using my Nintendo Switch with the Korg gadget, which is a thing that I highly recommend that we can I can maybe talk more about another time.
Yeah. So I think that's everything. You can also find us anywhere you can find podcasts. I've had people come to me and say, "Hey, you're on this site. Is this your main site?" I'm like, "I've never heard that site before."
Yeah, I've had people come up to me and talk about the podcast, and then they're fucking I've tried to make Friends by Default more visible on YouTube, but because for whatever fucking reason they go to YouTube first to find a podcast, and then they end up listening to the shitty show that I did before Friends by Default, which was kind of our test run of it, and a lot of those 80 of those episodes are up on the YouTube channel. I'm like, don't listen to that. I'm not gonna take them down because at this point, why would I just leave them up there and everything? But I've not put the last couple episodes of that show on there. I probably will someday, but that one's bad. Listen to Friends by Default. It's better.
We also have a YouTube page now. You'll Like 'Em.
Ooh, nice.
And it only has one video right now, which is the first episode, the first part of the first episode, which I'm gonna work on putting the second part of the first episode up, and then putting everything else up. And then hopefully they'll be able to do simultaneous uploads on Libsyn and get that new shit that goes on Libsyn also on fucking YouTube at the same time. So hopefully that will get working soon. But I think that's it. I think an hour 40 is enough time to record.
Yeah. Oh, geez. I didn't know we were going that long.
Well, yeah, we can cut this down. I'm sure we
Yeah.
can cut a lot of stuff out and trim some of the stuff where I just talk like this and just kind of ramble out stream of consciousness now.
Subscribe.
Yeah. Does it say I have 2 videos up?
No, it says you have one video. It's just remember that would you like me to take down the first episode that was like, because that's on the 100 Years channel? Remember when we were originally going to like put everyone's shows on the 100 Years channel, but that ended up never happening. So we just have like the first episode of You'll Like 'Em on there, and then we have the first episode of that show that Liam and Zach,
Noise Choice Boys.
Yeah, that they never ended up doing. Which
you never know.
You never know. They might get back to it. And then like I know Josh is trying to get the Lions Den going. He just put the first episode of that on his own channel. Yeah. And everything, like, which is probably a better place for it than 100 Years.
But yeah, we'll have more videos up there soon, hopefully. I also made a YouTube playlist on there that I shared, which just has from our first episode up until the last episode, I think it was 17, every band that we've talked about and every song.
That is a great fucking idea.
Because I wanted to do Spotify, but then I looked up some of the bands and they weren't on Spotify. So I was like, fuck, okay. Because like, Ash Ra Temple's not on there, and that's one of the bands we
overall, YouTube's probably a better place for that.
Yeah.
But no, I was gonna say that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah. So we have that. That's on the You'll Like 'Em YouTube channel under created playlists, and I'll share it on Twitter and Facebook and those places once we put more stuff on there.
Right.
But that's it for us. So listen to our show, subscribe on we're on iTunes, so you can subscribe and like there, and please leave us a rating and all that fun stuff, and tell your friends about the show. That's the best way we can do it, because the fucking advertising that we do on Facebook is bullshit and it's all fucking fake accounts. And if anybody tells you that advertising on anywhere is a good idea, it's all fucking fake accounts, man. It's the government. They're out there. I'm turning it Yaskovich.
Yeah, you are.
I'm doing because he's not here. I have to.
You need to stop that. or else I'm gonna have to slap you.
Yeah, it seems that when he's not here, someone has to fill that role. Apparently.
No, like when this episode started, I was like, I noticed I was like doing some Yaskovich isms, like without like intending and everything. I was like, ugh.
Yeah. Well, hopefully he'll be back next week, or the next episode we get up. And thank you guys for listening. And sorry again for the whole fucking like big gap between episodes. It's just we've been really busy, and college is coming up soon and all that fucky stuff. So
don't apologize. They're here for you. You're not here for them.
Well, it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column
them.
B.
Fuck them.
Please don't stop listening to the show just because he said fuck you. I love you guys.
I think it's time to end the episode.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.